SG Reads.
Hello fellow travelers, my name's SG and welcome to the channel. Today, I'll be doing a new analog horror series that just has one video out, but it's 45 minutes. It's been out for about 2 weeks and it's called The Winterland Incident, Winter Balls Entertainment. Now, this does have a lot to it. It's very interesting, very interactive if you will, while at the same time keeping certain themes from other projects or analog series, but giving its own twist. That's what I really do love. While at the same time being something familiar, what matters is that you add your own take, you add your own flair to it, and this definitely has it. It does have a lot of heart to it, I could tell. The voices, the characterizations are very interesting and very well done and detailed, and so I just got really excited about this and wanted to cover it. So, if you like this content, please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. If you want to go check out the original videos, I'll leave a link below in the comment section and in the description, of course, because I do suggest going to check out the original video, having your own opinions, and if you have your own theories about what's happening in the overall series or what this is leading to, please leave it down in the comment section. I'd love to hear. Thanks again for watching, and let's continue, shall we? This video consists of several different clips from throughout the history of the main character, or main monster if you will, known as Polar Pooh. Now the main focus is him, of course, throughout his sort of construction to his ending. Well, I use ending in a loose term. We open up with a journalist talking to Mr. Graves, who is one of the creators of not only Polar Pooh, but also of the Wendy's Waffles, and of course the Winter Wonderland itself. Now he was followed by Freddy Burton, who everyone insists was actually the brains behind the operation for the most part, when it came to business that is, because he was an marketing expert. And it was followed by Harold McCoy and Nancy Mandela, both employees of Mr. Graves and Mr. Burton, and for the most part they seemed content with very much, considering they all went to college at the same place at the same time, growing very close to one another, almost like a brotherhood if you will, but insisting that Graves and Burton were more like brothers than best friends, insisting that this would later go on to make a company known as Winter Balls Entertainment, a derivative of Wendy's Waffles, with its main attraction going to be Winter Wonderland, with its host, as of course, being Polar Pooh. Though shortly after we do know that the creator, Freddy Burton, did end up tragically passing, with no much information about that, just that it happened during the construction of the machine itself, or with the timeline we're giving, pretty much after the machine was constructed, but when the environment or the amusement park itself was being in the middle of kind of being developed, if you will. And throughout the tapes we see that Walter Graves, aka Mr. Graves, was becoming more and more unhinged without Freddy Burton, and it was kind of scaring everybody around him. We then find that there was a series of missing children that was going around as well, including some that were related to some of the employees there, notably Nancy Mandela, when her daughter went missing under the care of Mr. Graves. We then get several clips of test interactions from Polar Pooh, whether it be sounding or whether it be something along those lines of crowd interaction, music, and of course we do get the final image of him being captured by a United States government funded agency. Now this agency of course being the United States Entity Department, where this file itself was classified as number 22, knowing the Polar Pooh was indeed counted as the birthday boy. We are also given prohibited tapes from the police department describing the crimes that were supposedly inflicted by a worker that was doing the mascot outfit at the same time. While this was not confirmed, we do have kind of confirmation from Graves that this Anthony Candace was accused of the crimes of these children. We don't really know that for a fact or what the outcome of that ultimately was, but we do know that Graves himself is not one to be trusted. Now back to the United States Entity Department, where we do find that they have captured Polar Pooh, and that he is currently being contained by these agencies, if you will, and they keep testing him on different frequencies, whether it be sound or imagery testing. Now this is really telling, because they do say that there does seem to be some sort of possession with the animatronic suit, or the animatronic period. Now, it's unknown how many spirits that are inhibiting this kind of animatronic, but at the same time, they're trying to figure it out and whether there's a way to release it. We end with a note and sort of way that insists that this is only part 1 of a multiple parts, because it ends with end of file, leading into another creature that may have been created by the same people. Now, there are several details and elements I did leave out, but I do that mainly because I want to get into more detail as we talk about other characters and their places in the story. So we will talk about all the little bits and pieces here and there that I did take note of. But, as I said before, if you really want to get the full experience, the full story, and your own opinion on it, please do go support the original creator. It really is a good series, and it does have a lot of interesting tidbits and interesting kind of twist to it. So, like I said, let's continue on, and with characters. Or, to be more precise, who do I think is the narrator of all this? Now, as I said before, these are all tapes, if you will. They are VHS tapes to the bone, even given the idea that these were made back in the 1970s, going to probably the early 1980s. From the creation of Polar Pooh all the way up to the capture of Polar Pooh. So, is there really a narrator? And the answer is yes. Mainly because we do see different effects, if you will. Now, my main opinion on this, mainly because we don't really have too much information to go off of who is the narrator as of this very moment, but we can say that the unit that has him right now, the United States Entity Department, they are combining these tapes into one file, so they are the ones kind of putting them together from different collected materials, whether it be promotional material, as we've seen before, or whether they're recorded from the security guards, because we do know that there was a security guard that was attacked by Polar Pooh. That being, of course, Ethan Smith, who was a newer recruit and was tasked with not just recording the area, but also checking on Polar Pooh himself, only to be tricked and turns out that he was to be hunted as well. There's a lot we can get from that video, but like I said, we'll get to that in a minute. So it does seem for the most part that these are combined tapes. But we're being shown this as somebody else. And I do have to say that the watcher of these tapes is Polar Pooh himself. Mainly because they want to get a reaction out of it. They want him to have this test on him, I guess you could say. That would have to be the smartest way, because that's what we get at the very end of the video. We get a sound and visual, so it makes sense that when they're trying to get this rise out of Polar Pooh at the very end, it makes sense that they would put a TV in front of him and show the promotional material, the interviews, the tapes, and everything in front of him, trying to get a reaction as well. And we do see throughout the video as well that something is getting a reaction. We do know that there are several times where there is something talking to us, the viewer, such as in Anomaly, if you will. And it definitely does feel to be pointing in that direction. Now, the biggest question I think everybody will be having is, who's haunting Polar Pooh? Now, as I said before, there seems to be multiple spirits haunting him, and we are suggesting that throughout the video. But if I had to say that there was one specific one before, it would have to be the adopted son of Mr. Graves, or Walter Graves. Mainly because Nancy points out that when she was in the development of the Polar Pooh character, he brought in a young boy she'd never seen before, a young child, and he gave her hints on what would make the best mascot character for their up-and-coming attraction. Now, when that happened, she did take it to heart, designed one, and they managed to make a full-on animatronic of the description that the little boy gave. And we do know that there was a child that grew up alongside Nancy Mandela's daughter, that being Michael. Now, we don't really know much about Michael, but I can say that he might be the adopted son of Mr. Graves, as I said before, mainly because it seems like she didn't really know that he had any kids. He just showed up with him. But it seems that they grew up together for a second with Helena. Now, we do know that they did keep in contact with Graves for a very long time, even after Burton's sudden passing. So, for the most part, we do know that Michael was still around. So that leads more into a timeline issue, if you will. But it rather fits, if you will. I'll explain that later. But if I had to say who the first spirit that inhibited the Polar Pooh animatronic, it'd have to be Michael. And we even get that small chuckle when he says that Michael's been dying to see Helena right before the incident of Helena happened. Now, we'll talk about that as well later on. But there does seem to be a sadistic tone between Mr. Graves. And we do see that throughout the video, that he takes everything as a joke in a sadistic, kind of sick way. Now, we've talked a lot about Freddy Burton and Mr. Graves, but the ones we haven't talked about really are Nancy Mandela and Harold McCoy. Harold McCoy is himself a lead engineer. He designed the animatronics along with the help of Freddy Burton and Walter Graves, while going off of the descriptions of lead design artist with Nancy Mandela. So they are very important features in this, but the main one that we seem to take note of happens to be Harold McCoy, mainly because when we get reactions from Polar Pooh after the incidents happen, or after certain events happen as we know it, he does have a bad reaction with McCoy, saying that he is a bad person, he is a killer in some ways, when they are giving him this idea of giving him a sensory between knowing what's an innocent person and what's a criminal. And when they bring up both Walter Graves and Harold McCoy, it goes haywire. There is this idea that something in Polar Pooh is reacting badly to both of them. Oddly enough, it doesn't count Mr. Graves as innocent, rather he's not innocent, saying that while they can't really be mad at him for what has happened, they do hate Harold McCoy though, which is interesting to bring up in and of itself. So, we don't really know much of what Harold McCoy is, other than he has been with them since the very beginning, making them certain animatronics, and even has his own kind of business, and that being Techco Engineering. We don't really know much besides that, but he may be the one responsible for the events that have led up to this point. With Nancy Mandela, for as we know right now, seeming to be the one that's pretty much not knowing what's happening, and we do know that because when she's brought up amongst the Polar Pooh identification circuit, it counts her as innocent, meaning that she has nothing to do with this. She's just a bystander in the midst of all this craziness. Now, we've talked a lot about Walter Graves, but let's talk about Freddy Burton for right now, before we talk about Walter Graves in better detail, if you will. Now, Freddy Burton seems to be the co-creator of Wendy's Waffles along with Walter Graves, but we do know that he passed shortly a couple years into the Winter Wonderland kind of project. He worked alongside a lot of the main parts, mainly they said with business overall, but we do know that he did seem to have a closer relationship to, well, Walter Graves at the same time. He was, in fact, kind of going along with Nancy Mandela as well, insisting her in the creation of certain characters. And we kind of get hints from the way she reacts to the loss of Freddy Burton that they may have been in a relationship. In fact, I had to theorize that she was the father to Helena, because we don't really talk much about Nancy Mandela's husband. So if I had to say anything else, they kept it under wraps. They were talking back and forth, it seems, because she does seem very distraught and very destroyed by the fact that he passed. And we don't really get much more information than that, but that would have to be where I think the relationship between them really happened, started, and or were in the middle of, if you will. And we do know that Mr. Graves may have found that out, but I'll talk about that right now. And at the same time, it does seem that he was ultimately taken out right at the ending, or the end creation of the Polar Pooh animatronic. Mainly because the way it seems is that they started development of him while Freddy Burton was still alive, but ultimately he passed before they could fully put it out, because if we could follow the timeline where Walter Graves is talking to a journalist, he was just about to reveal it to the people, and that he had lost, in fact, Freddy Burton for the most part already. So it does seem to lead more towards that direction. So, with all that being said, that's what we know about Freddy Burton. Just that he was a genius in business, friendly to all, never had a mean bone in his body, and was considered a friend to almost everyone that he knew. and may have even been closer to some than others. Now let's talk about his other half, Walter Graves. Now, Walter Graves, aka Mr. Graves, is the partner to Freddy Burton, and at first it seemed that he was really distraught over the loss of Freddy Burton overall, but as we go on, we do see that he takes on more of a sadistic tendency, that he does seem to chuckle here and there when he talks about Freddy Burton's sudden disappearance and or sudden death. So, when we do go on to meet his opinion on more of the characters, we don't really get much of an interaction between him and Harold McCoy. We do know that Harold McCoy does respect him, but knows that the business probably won't last without Freddy Burton, because he was the business. He is more of the architect, if you will. Mr. Graves went to college for architecture and the building of kind of buildings and attractions, while Freddy Burton, as I said before, was there for business, knew how to do it, and was beloved by most. Mr. Graves, not so much. He wasn't really looked highly upon by most of them. And the one interaction we do see a lot of throughout this is Mr. Graves' reaction with Nancy Mandela, where it does seem he does make inappropriate comments here and there, such as "I'll see you in your dreams tonight," and her being confused by a statement, and even wanting to pick up her daughter from the park around 5 o'clock so that they can go to a party. But when we do find out later that her daughter did go missing that same day, he does not respond. In fact, he just seems to be breathing very heavily. We don't know really what happened that night, but we can pretty much guess overall by the ending of that clip. That's more for the end of the video. So for right now, we will have to say that Mr. Walters seemed to be obsessed with Nancy Mandela. Now, was he so obsessed that he wanted to get rid of Freddy Burton just to be with her? We're not really sure, but it does seem to be indicating that direction. And because we do see a more sadistic side as the years go on after Freddy Burton's sudden passing. So he does seem to become more and more unhinged with the sudden disappearances of more kids, and insists that it is nothing, in fact wanting to put the blame on somebody else. And like I said, the Polar Pooh does seem to identify him as a dangerous individual. Maybe not as guilty as some of the others, but definitely a dangerous individual. Now let's get to the real issue here, what really caused the investigation between the local police and of course the United States Entity Department, and that being the Winterland Incident. Now that seems to be the big question here. We really aren't given that much evidence, other than it seems that Polar Pooh went off. He seemed to have gone crazy and started to attack people. Seemed to have control and a mind of his own. We don't really know much more than what's happened there, other than once they captured him, it seems that he was almost alive. Too alive, as a matter of fact. The controls weren't working, and they were only able to dismantle him for the most part that would let him be kind of docile to a point. So what happened? He said he attacked several children, but I'm willing to bet he attacked something more. He attacked somebody with a purpose. And I think, for the most part, the way things are pointing, because of the way everything's being laid out before us in these interview tapes, and the way he's reacting, is that Polar Pooh attacked Walter Graves. He may have even hurt him, mortally wound him overall, or maybe even just taking him out altogether, but it does seem to point towards that idea, because every time they show his picture, he seems to go off. Every time they show an image or hear his voice, he goes wild, and even attacked the interviewer trying to help him in the department itself. So, for the most part, if I had to say, what set off Polar Pooh at the very incident that we're talking about seems to be Walter Graves himself, and that Polar Pooh finally managed to get control of the body that he'd been trapped in for so long. So, for the most part, that's where I have to leave that for now. But we'll get to the main, bigger theory right now. Alright, so from a main theory, if you will, there does seem to be a correlation. I'm going to say what's been said. As I said before, I do think that it is Michael that is in the, or at least is the main body spirit, if you will, of Polar Pooh. But it seems that there have been other spirits added along the way. Some are mostly children. I think that's mainly because they're easy to control for the most part. It seems that the one they consider to be the main bad in this is Harold McCoy. he seems to be the one to put them in the animatronic period. Now, I do think that the disappearance between Freddy Burton and the original release of Polar Pooh are the same. I do think that maybe Polar Pooh did attack Freddy Burton, and that Freddy Burton was the original or the first victim of the Polar Pooh incident. Hence, we really don't get much detail about what happened to Freddy Burton. Now, I will say that I don't think his soul is in the Polar Pooh outfit at all. I think that that is a process that only Harold McCoy knows, and that Mr. Graves is just willing to take advantage of overall, because they do seem to hone in more on Harold McCoy rather than Mr. Graves. Mr. Graves seems to just relish in the chaos he's causing, in the harm he's doing to everybody around him. And he also, I think, wanted Freddy Burton out of the picture, not because he wanted to run the business, but I think it all goes back to Nancy Mandela. He wants her attention, he wants her affection, and it kind of drove him crazy to realize that she was pregnant with his daughter. So I do think that that does answer a lot of questions as why is he so hell-bent on getting rid of Freddy Burton when they've been partners for over a minute now, for a very long time, since the very beginning of going to college together. So that does seem to have some correlation, if you will. So when it comes down to it overall, it seems that this also goes back to the idea of Polar Pooh saying that Mr. Graves is not innocent, but at the same time, they don't think he's guilty. Maybe that's just Michael himself not wanting to admit the tragedies that Mr. Graves has caused to all the other children, and it does seem that their spirits may have combined overall into one entity, because when we see them together, they do kind of look like they've blended together. Or when they talk in kind of we/us kind of speaking. But overall, they do share the same voice and the same manner of speaking. So it does seem that they themselves have fused together and are currently seeking revenge against either Mr. Graves and Harold McCoy. Now, we don't really know if the spirit of Freddy Burton is still out there, but we can insinuate, because of that ending, that there is more still to come. Now, as I said, Helena is going to play a main character for the most part, mainly because we do know that she was kind of abducted by Walter Graves and was found later on in the park. We don't know in what condition, but we do know that she was not alive anymore, according to police reports overall. So it does seem that something terrible did happen to her out there, and it was somebody in a mascot suit that attacked her. Now, that seems to be leading towards Polar Pooh kind of living that out, but we do know that she's not one of the spirits that's inhabiting him. What we do know is that at the very end of that same clip, we do see the image of a rabbit with human eyes peering out, saying as if that she's still alive in there in the horror of it all. And at the very end, we do know that there are more out there, all suffering from the same thing, if you will. Twisted and turned around, and one that we haven't really seen yet. And we see him dripping in water, suggesting that he wanted to continue on, if you will. That being Mr. Graves. He wanted to build a whole band based on this style of recreation, the animatronics. And I think that's what really drove them all off the deep end. Because the Winterland Incident is said to have been involved mainly with Polar Pooh, but we aren't really saying that he was the only attacker. It does seem that the other two did join along and ran off in the chaos of it all, leaving Polar Pooh to deal with the police and the department themselves. So we do know that they are out there, hiding out somewhere, probably looking for the ones that wronged them, and if I had to say, they're looking for Harold McCoy. Because while they do bring him up several times, they don't bring his picture up at all. The only one they seem to focus on is Mr. Graves, aka Walter Graves, suggesting that that is the one they consider to be the hurtful one, or the one that they may have already attacked. So, when it comes down to the next videos, they will cover more of the other characters that are coming in, and what it looks like is a bunny character, and one other one I couldn't really make out, but we will see later on in the next set of videos coming out. And for all we know, that this is just phase 1 of this kind of style of video making. This whole series could just be about the United States Entity Department. considering that it was said to be just file 1 of maybe 3 and or more. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was very fun. I did enjoy it. I did have a lot to say about it, and with so much information coming out that I didn't really get to cover all of what I wanted to say, but I covered mainly the main points. Things I do think will come back later on in the future that will play a main part, and what did play in the main part of the whole video overall. So we will see more happening later on. We will definitely see different individual characters popping in and out, and maybe even seeing more than just those 3. Maybe seeing the test characters. They may be half animatronic, half human, because we do see that there is a sense that they are mixing human parts with animatronics to kind of build these creations, and just using the souls of other people to kind of power them, if you will. Now, we do know that for a fact that certain things are happening, and that all the souls within Polar Pooh have combined, considering what we see at the very end of the 3 children. The one in the middle seems to be the one that's in the most control, suggesting a horrifying image that maybe they've all agreed on their own appearance, on what they are, and who they want to be. But we'll see that later on. Thanks again for watching. I hope you guys enjoy. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. Please go support the original creator if you can, because it's a really good video, and I do want to show some love where it is deserved. This is a very well done and very well animated series that I want to see more of right away. So, thanks again for watching, and see you guys next time. Have a great one.